everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm here with Tim Susman. We're going to be talking about his book series and his newest book in this series, The Revolution and the Fox, which comes out in just a few days. So remember, if you like this video, hit like and subscribe and the little bell notification so you know when I put up more videos. So for now, I'd like to turn over to Tim for a few minutes and just to let us know a little bit about this series and when it came out and what it covers.
Sure. Thanks, Marilla. The book series is called The Collations. It's set in an alternate history around the Revolutionary War in a world where there's magic. Mm-hmm. And so there are magic schools. A lot of the history hasn't changed a lot because not a lot of people have access to magic, and the ones who do, at least in the British Empire, are mostly in service to the government. So magic is another resource that the government keeps and uses in the way it always does. However, one of the premises of the world is that about 400 years ago, one sorcerer, for reasons known only to himself, decided that he wanted to create a whole bunch of people out of animals. And so the world is now somewhat populated with a small number of these animal people who are called collations because the sorcerer who did this was named Collatus. They are mostly second-class citizens. I think of them in the 1800s the way foreigners like Chinese people were viewed in the Wild West, where people understood that, yes, these are people, but they're not people. Like, they can't own land or hold office or do things like that. Or become sorcerers and learn how to wield magic. So the book series follows one protagonist who is the first collation to be admitted to a sorcerer's school. And this is right around the same time that a lot of unrest is brewing in the American colonies, leading up to a Revolutionary War in which he'll play a part. This fourth book takes place actually after the war, when he and his friends have already established their independence. The new United States of America is figuring itself out as well. And it follows them in their struggle to learn what kind of people they're going to be, what they're going to do with this new independence, and the forces that still don't want them to have it even after the war.
Okay, so these collations, they're kind of more like the animal people in Cordwainer Smith stories, where they're made from an original animal. They're not like a hybrid combination. Someone didn't mix people and other animals. It's just they made people out of animals.
Correct.
So, and so are there like different kinds of collations, like there's cat ones and dog ones, or is it?
There are. They are mostly made from species that would have been living in England in the 1400s. I have a list. There's about 20 different ones. So you'll have beavers, you'll have otters, you'll have foxes, you'll have squirrels, field mice and dormice. Wolves are rare but do exist. Polecats, and those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. But
okay, well, that sounds like a lot of fun. You develop different like cultures for the different kinds of collations.
A little bit. Mm-hmm. To some extent, they retain the kind of folklore views of those animals. Mm-hmm. So at least in the first book, people are kind of joking with our main character is a fox, joking with him about leaving chicken coops unguarded, or the fact that he's going to try to trick them out of everything. But the collations are a small enough population that in most places they're kind of put together into their own community. Mm-hmm. So there isn't a whole lot of differentiation between species within those communities, mm-hmm. although there is a little bit. It's more the collations against the rest of the world.
Okay, so like the predator species like the fox and a mouse species, they get along.
Yes.
Okay. So you said these were alternate history, so that's kind of cool. Um, a friend and I developed an alternate history timeline for a book series, and it was kind of almost more fun than writing them, was like trying to figure out what things had changed and what things were the same. So, and it's just like kind of a mark of how I guess sometimes your family knows that you're weird because you're a writer. Because I just like went up to my dad one day. I'm like, Dad, if Abraham Lincoln loses the 1864 election, McClellan wins, who's president after McClellan? And he actually came up with somebody, and it turned out would have died during the McClellan administration. But I mean, he just like thought of somebody to name. So yes, coming up with those what ifs is kind of fun. So what are some of the things that you decided to change?
So one of the big ones is I presumed that with access to sorcery, Great Britain would have had an easier time quelling the uprisings in the 1770s, but those sentiments wouldn't have gone away, and a lot of those people would have been viewed as martyrs. So when the colonies come around again to those sentiments, which in my book is in the 18 teens,
Okay.
What you have is a few of the people from that time. So John Adams is still around writing scathing columns in the Boston newspapers. Abigail Adams ends up playing a part in the third book as a diplomatic emissary to the European countries, because she and John are some of the only ones left from that first wave of revolution, and people are afraid that John will just make everyone angry. I have John Quincy Adams as sort of the political leader of the rebellion, if not the military one. And Andrew Jackson, who made his reputation in the War of 1812, plays a big part in the third book as well, and is still a pretty terrible person. Mm-hmm. So the big one is really the revolution was pushed off, but then that had other effects, like the French Revolution ends up not happening either, because a lot of that sentiment was fueled by the success of the American Revolution. And so when the American Revolution does happen in this fourth book, we see that things start to go bad in France almost immediately.
Okay. Okay. So is there anything going on with this book where you're pushing it to get it out, or is there going to be like a book party or anything? Or is it just an online publisher, or coming out in paperback, or?
It's out. It will be out in paperback. The series is all out in paperback. The reason it's coming out on a Friday, which is not like most publishers, I think, release books on midweek, Tuesday or Wednesdays. But we're used to releasing them at conventions. So the other books all came out at one of the big conventions that Argyll goes to. But of course, this year we don't have conventions. So they were going to release it on the Friday of a convention, and so they're just releasing it on that date anyway.
Okay. So what kind of conventions are they normally at?
They would normally go to small science fiction conventions or larger furry conventions. Obviously, with the animal people, these books have a big appeal in the furry community, and that's where I and the publishers come from originally. So we have a lot of connection there and a lot of friendships. So that's where we'd normally go to release the books.
Okay, that's cool. Is there anything else you want to say about this series?
I've been thinking about these books the books have been coming out since 2017. They've come out about once a year, but the first book and the second book have been in my head since 2009, 2010. So they've been in the works for a decade.
Books do that.
They do. It's neat to have it all out. One of the other, it was hard to wrap up. It's always hard to wrap up a series, because you not only have to wrap up the book properly, but you have to go back to all the themes of the earlier books and wrap those up. And one of the themes of this series is the coming of age story repeated at different levels of society. So you have a personal coming of age story with Kip, who's the hero, starting out, I think, at age 18 or 19, still living at home and trying to go out and figure out who he's going to be. You have a coming of age story for the American colonies who are fighting for their independence. You have a similar sort of story from the professional sorcerers group, in terms of, not so much in terms of how the group evolves, but in terms of how we see them, and how we see them grows over the course of the books, because we see them the way sorcery happens in many different communities. And there's also a coming of age story for the collations in general, because they are, in a very literal way, the children of humanity, in that we created them. And so there's a question of what responsibility do we have to these people who are our creations, who are our children, and how does that affect how we should treat them and opportunities they should get. So it was interesting writing this book, because this fourth book kind of happens after the end of the coming of age story. The war ends in the third book. Kip gains the respect of professional sorcerers in the third book. He kind of grows up in a very real way in that book. And so I wanted to go beyond that and just give a sense of the direction that the world of sorcery was going to take, the world of humanity as regards the collations, Kip himself, and then the American colonies. Like, once they have this independence, what are they going to do with it? Because I think that's also a really interesting part of a coming of age story. And usually they just end with, well, you know, now I've come of age.
And we grew up. The end.
Yep. We won the revolution. Now what?
So what made you pick the American Revolution as your turning point? Is there just have a particular interest in that time in history, or the people that were around at that time?
I think it was two reasons. And one was that if I'm trying to mirror a coming of age story at all different levels, I grew up in the United States. That's the country scale coming of age story that I'm most familiar with. We have mythologized that story, and it's part of who we are growing up. I did conceive of it before Hamilton the musical became a big sensation, but it's been a big help in like doing more research about what was going on at the time and what people were there. So Alexander Hamilton survives in my world, and his son becomes one of the generals in the American Revolution. So I thought I could at least do that for them.
Okay.
But I think the other reason was that I like thinking of magic in a less technological society, and that American Revolution is really the last war to take place in a pre-industrial society as we think of it. So there's that. Although I will say I have been thinking about how that would translate to our present day world, like what effects how technology and magic would intertwine. But that wasn't in the scope of the story as I was thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be fun too. And especially, I guess, when you see it sometimes where you don't expect it, like the Transformers movies are not really great movies, although they're somewhat all right for just watching with some popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed by like movie 3, the White House is surrounded by detectors that detect the kind of energy that run on, and you're like, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, if there really were Transformers, you'd want to know if they were near the White House, right? You know, so just trying to think of the wrinkles that come about once you change something, kind of interesting on what would the world be like, right? So
yeah, for sure. I think in a lot of ways, as I said, I treat magic as kind of just a resource, and the advent of technology would really make it almost a less important resource, but it's still one of those ones that's kind of randomly available to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So you can grow up with magic, or you can not have magic. Technology is supposed to be democratic, but also doesn't seem to quite follow those rules.
Right. It's something I try to discuss with my students. It's like, yeah, we have some cool technology. Who has access to it, right? Who gets to
Right.
it? And one of the 2012 pictures of the year, I show this to my students a lot to them. I don't think I have it bookmarked though, but so I won't put it in the description. But if you look around for 2012 pictures of the year, there's one where there's all these people on a beach and they're all holding something over their heads, and it's immigrants like in the Eastern Horn of Africa, and they all have a cell phone and they're looking for some signal. And it's like, it's different now. You cell phones have gone to the point where they're so ubiquitous that even if you're fleeing one country and going to another, it's still possible you might have one. And if you have a signal, you might be able to get money back to your family or something. Whereas in previous times, you once you left home, that might have been it. Maybe you could have mailed some money back or something, but even that has changed when you're an immigrant these days. So
yeah, I was reading, this was years ago, just the effect of mobile phones outside of the US in ways that we don't think about because it's not our culture and it's not our life. Like the ability to move money around so easily is something that can change people's lives, because you might have a lot of a resource, but if you have to travel 30 miles to sell it, and then they might not have anything useful for you to get back, then what good is it? And we were another example. We were in India. I want to say 6 years ago, about 2014-ish, and our driver was telling us how cell phones have changed the lives of small villages, in that they've significantly reduced gang violence, because now you have a resident who, when they see a threat or they see violence, they can take out their phone and call someone and get someone to come help. And that's been a huge change. Having access to information, he said, also changed them. Like, they're much more informed about politics now and how to vote.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I look forward to reading at least one of those books. Maybe I'll go back to book one though and not start with book four. And
book one is on sale all this month. The ebook is free on most sites.
All right, I'll put those links in the description.
Okay.
Well, thank you for joining me today, Tim. And I hope that a bunch of people see this video and go out and buy your books. And
thank you so much for the time, and thanks for having me on.
And if you are watching, remember, hit like and subscribe and buy Tim's books. Okay, very important. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.